Thank you, sir. Just to promote the magazine a little more, guys, I did an article in there this edition on yards, and it'll kind of play in a little bit to, excuse me, what we're talking about here tonight. I did a program maybe a year and a half ago or so on point-to-point and continuous running. This is going to be what I think is a little more detailed because I just got through about a month ago, maybe less than that, designing a point-to-point layout for a gentleman that I think really turned out well, and he's really happy with it. So what I want to do here is go through the first part, talking about some of the mistakes that first-timers, newbies make on it. I've got Andy in here because this layout you're going to see as we go through the program here, it was specifically designed for an area in Tennessee that Andy's very familiar with. I'm really not. So I want him on here he'll give some expertise about the area and things like that. Hopefully it'll be an interesting show and that.
Okay, what about when I check that?
Okay, that's fine. Just as an introduction, this program is going to explore the advantages of point-to-point versus continuous running. And I'm assuming in this program that you want your layouts focal point to be operations. They're not necessarily scenery, not necessarily just running trains. You want to think about operations and prototypical operations. So this is what we're going to focus on tonight. If you're more inclined to want to sit back and watch trains traverse an endless loop, maybe this program isn't for you tonight. That's going to leave that totally up to you. But if you want to explore the concept of point-to-point operations where trains actually perform prototypical tasks, I think you might learn something from the program tonight. So I'd like you to stick around there. What we're going to do in the program, I'm going to first talk about some of the common mistakes that are made, continuous running versus point-to-point, the advantages, at least the way I look at it, of point-to-point operations. And then I've got what I think is a really good example of a true point-to-point layout that we designed that will operate prototypically. And we'll get into that too. Okay, let's do the common mistakes first. I see this happen all the time, guys. First-timers build layouts, but they don't set clear goals for what they want. If you asked them, why are you building the layout? I'll bet you the majority of the time you're going to get something, I like to watch trains run. Well, every time I hear that, I take that as code words for I like and I want continuous running. I get a lot of people want me to design layouts and they always want continuous running in that. First-timers, I really think first-timers don't realize that watching trains run gets old fairly quickly. Now, some people it takes a while, other people it doesn't take very long. But what you don't hear first-timers say, and this is, I always think about this when somebody contacts me, they don't say, I want to operate trains or I want to build a transportation system. They don't think of their layouts as a transportation system. They think of it as a model railroad. I'd like people to think of it as a transportation system. They're not a model railroad. Here's some other things. This is what I think first-timers should be saying. They should say, I want to do prototypical operations. I don't hear that. I want to create a miniature transportation system. I never hear that. Then I say, and then things like I want trains to go somewhere or I want trains to come from somewhere. I never hear a new person say that to me. I want trains to run through scenes only once. Never hear that. I want trains to do prototypical jobs. And I hardly ever hear that. And the one at the bottom I feel is the most important one. You want your railroad to be believable. And I think a continuous running layout really isn't super believable. Now, when you're designing for operations, it is difficult in continuous running. If continuous running is your primary goal, it's really tough to design a layout that operates correctly. Continuous run layouts make it hard for trains to go somewhere. There's no place for them to go. They just simply basically run around in a circle. It might be a fancy circle, but it's still just a circle. Continuous running makes it hard for trains to come from somewhere. It goes back to the same thing. If they can't go somewhere, they can't come from somewhere. There. Most first-timers think in terms of continuous running first, operation second. And I always hear people say to me once in a while, well, if I'm running trains, I'm operating. No, you're not. What you're doing is you're rail fanning. You're not operating trains, you're just rail fanning trains. Okay, continuous running. Here's the most obvious one. It's just a real basic up and over oval. They're 4x8 layout. Great one to start with if you're really a newbie, but believe me, it will get old very, very quickly. And when I say very, very quickly, might take you a couple years to build it, but I've seen many, many modelers in less than a year after it's been built get tired of watching the trains loop over the top of itself a few times. But it's a good one to learn on. I don't want to denigrate it to that point. Now, this is the folded dog bone. This is probably the most popular one you see around where you have continuous running. The problem with this layout is if this thing is sitting in a room where the outside edges of this layout are actually walls, you got yourself some big time reach problems. There's places where you can't get into this area. Right in this area, if you can see the arrow, my cursor, if this was a wall down the right side, I don't know how you get back into switch cars and reach back into there. That's all over a 4-foot reach almost. It's at least a 36 to 40 inch reach back in there and that. And again, the bottom line, this might look kind of neat, but it's really just an oval that's kind of elongated, and trains are still, all they're going to do is run in circles, one direction or the other. Okay. Trains that run on continuous loops, as I said earlier, they don't go anywhere. They have nowhere to go. They can't come from anywhere. They usually never leave the visible portion of the layout. So you can, even if you've got a divider down the middle of it, basically it's not gone anywhere. It's just going around in a circle or a loop there. And trains will travel through scenes multiple times on a continuous run layout. And then again, that goes back to my word of rail fanning. When you have trains doing that, as far as I'm concerned, you're rail fanning trains. You're not operating trains. Continuous loop layouts have a believability problem. What do I mean by that? Again, take all those things that are up above there that you can't do with a continuous loop, and you end up with a layout that's really not very believable. It's a nice looking layout. Trains look nice running, but it's just, it becomes what I would call a display layout, not a operating layout. Okay, let's talk about true point-to-point layouts. This is what we're going to talk about here in a little bit. This is a layout I designed for a gentleman, and he gave me the parameters of what he wants, which I'll show you here in a minute. But this is just kind of just a quick little view of what I designed, what I did for this gentleman based on what he wanted to have done there. Okay. Now, number one advantage of point-to-point layouts is you can operate them prototypically. Again, this sounds repetitious, but I think it's very important. Trains come from somewhere and trains go somewhere. If you have staging, the trains disappear from the layout and then they appear on the layout. It gives the feeling that the trains are going somewhere. They're just not running in circles. And the big thing is, in most of the layouts that I operate on out here in Colorado, their trains run only once. They don't run multiple times on the layout. The train has a specific job. It does its job. You don't see it again until you come back a month later for another op session. More advantages. You can create a miniature transportation system. If you have the space, you can create a layout that is not just a model railroad. It's actually a working transportation system. And I think that's really, really important. Trains can operate like the real railroad. Go back to the transportation system. This is one of the keys here. Operators can walk with their trains. And I think that is what makes a big difference between just a continuous loop layout and a point-to-point layout. When the operators have to walk with their trains and follow their trains, they actually get the feeling that they're going somewhere. And that's what you want. You want them to have that feeling. And when trains travel through scenes only once, that's exactly what the prototype does there. They don't run time after time after time. The big thing is that last one. If you build yourself a mini transportation system, you really get to share it with your friends. And again, all of the layouts I operate on out here, this is what we do. We go to each other's houses and we run these layouts, and they are designed to operate like the real thing. Okay, what are the things that a point-to-point layout has in common with almost every point-to-point layout? Well, this is the first one, and this is the big one, and this is staging yards. Almost all, I don't know how you could build a point-to-point layout without having staging yards, because again, you got to have the trains come from somewhere. You've got to have them go somewhere. Staging allows trains to appear and disappear on the layout, and it also allows the trains to run one time. This is one of the layouts I operate on out here in Colorado. What you're seeing here is, and that looks like a heck of a big staging yard, and it is, but you're only seeing one half of the staging area. This is only one half. Where the gentleman is standing down there in the picture, to his right is a whole nother set of staging tracks on this layout. But this layout is also 2,700 square foot big. So the staging yard area is bigger than most layouts that I design. What else do you have to have? You got to have, this is the same layout, by the way, guys. You have to have a classification yard. Trains coming from somewhere need to be broken down, sorted, reclassified, and then the trains need to go somewhere. Now, on this layout, and I've operated a number of times on this layout, we have trains that run from staging to staging. We have trains that run from one area to this yard. There's multiple things that happen on this layout. And in an off session, it takes 21 of us to operate this layout. And we'll run, I think we'll run probably 25 to 30 trains in an off session. They're on it. So, but it's this whole layout was built with operations in mind and point-to-point operation and point-to-point design. This is still the same layout. What do point-to-point layouts have? Again, what do they have in common? Very narrow bench work. And I shouldn't say very narrow. I'll take that back. Narrow bench work, long mainline runs, numerous industries, view blocks, peninsulas, and the key is walk-along operations. There again, this is the same layout. You're just looking at different pictures of it. The one in the upper left-hand corner there, that I've worked that particular industry. It takes about takes you about 30, 40 minutes to work that industry. That whole shelf is about 24 inches wide maximum. That's all it is there. And there's a lot of operation in 24 inches there. Okay, now let's talk about this example that we've got here. And this is where I'm going to bring Andy in here in a second. A gentleman contacted me. He lives in Tennessee. He says, I want you to design me a point-to-point layout that runs through the town I was born in, runs through the town I currently live in. I want a branch line, and I want industries that either exist or did exist on the layout. The town names have to be real, and the towns have to be in geographical order. These were the things he gave me. Now, Andy, what's the CN and OTP? What does that mean?
Cincinnati, let's see. Cincinnati, Nashville, let's see, I'll look it up just a second. And Texas and Pacific, because they originally thought the Texas and Pacific would contract it. But just a second, I get to see no part. I can't remember.
Cincinnati something, I think it was. The other thing that he wanted on this layout was there was a branch line called the New River Branch, and it ran to a coal mine and it ran up to a lumber mill. And he wanted that included on the layout also as part of the layout. So,
New Orleans was the part I couldn't remember for a second. Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific Railway.
Okay. Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific.
Yep.
All right. Here were some of his wants on it. He wanted long mainline runs. Again, walk-along operations, hidden staging, view blocks, long passing sidings, trains traveling through scenes only once, and a pure directional travel on the layout. Now, I didn't come up with these guys. This is a client that got a hold of me, and this is what he told me he wanted there. So I got a feeling this wasn't his first rodeo here and that. Now, here's a map of Tennessee. Andy, explain to him the black line there.
The black line's the part of that section. It goes from Cincinnati to Chattanooga, originally built by the city of Cincinnati to reach the Midwest through Chattanooga. The black line you're seeing is commonly called the CRTP, or the Rat Hole is a rail fan's name of it. And you're seeing most of District 2, the middle district. There were 3 districts on it originally. So District 2, which is, model railroader's dream, tunnels, tall bridges.
The blue circle, guys, is actually what we modeled. That's the area we modeled, but we thought in terms of a much bigger area. Again, we thought in terms of from Cincinnati to Chattanooga, but there was no way, and he had a pretty good sized space, there was no way we could actually design a railroad that would run from Cincinnati to Chattanooga. That took a lot of space. So we took a small section. And again, the town names that you see there of Oneida, Helenwood, Glen Mary, Sunbright, Lansing, Oakdale, and Harriman are actually towns that run through Tennessee in that blue circle. And that is the order that the towns do pop up if you were traveling south. There, Oneida happens to be just across the border into Tennessee. They're just a few miles there. And then the rest of the towns go south of there. We made Cincinnati staging and we made Chattanooga staging. So that's how they're represented on the layout there. The gentleman, I think I'm correct in this, he told me he was born in Glen Mary. He now lives in Oneida. Well, I went on Google Earth and I looked at Glen Mary. They not only don't have a stoplight in Glen Mary, I don't even think they have a bar in Glen Mary. And if you don't have a bar or a stoplight, that's a small town. But he wanted it included on the layout, and that was perfectly fine to do that. Okay, here's the room that he has to deal with. We had 3 doors there. The door in the lower right-hand corner, we could cover that one up. That was going to be a non-issue with that one there. But the door along the southern side there, that had to remain open to get in and out. The door in the upper right-hand corner, he had to be able to use that door. But it was a lower right-hand door we didn't have to use. So we had a space here that was roughly 33 feet by 24. That's a big space, I grant it, it is. But we didn't use all of the space. We didn't use the whole thing. This is what he gave me to use. This was the space I had to design this layout within. 26 by 20 is what I had to work with. And I had to design something that fit all of those parameters that you've seen earlier that he gave me to do there. Okay, I'm going to switch back and forth here for just a second. There's the space. There's the bench work. Okay, now don't get the impression, guys, that I designed the bench work and then I put the railroad on the bench work. That isn't how it works. I designed the main line, I designed the branch line, how it would fit into this space, and then that's how the bench work turned out. I didn't go at it saying, well, I've got to build the bench work this way. Now, how do I fit this railroad onto this bench work? That limits you so much to what you can do with a layout there. So yeah, it kind of looks like the pictures I've got here that, okay, I had this space and I designed the bench work and now we're going to put a railroad on it. It didn't work that way. The railroad got designed first, and then the benchwork got built. And there's the picture of it with all the track on it. We're going to go, as we go along here, I'm going to talk about the branch lines and some of the other things about the track. But this is basically all of the track work on this layout. And every track that you see here is for a purpose. There's nothing here that is not there for a reason and a purpose to be there. Okay, now here's the different sections of the track. Obviously on the right side is our staging yards. I would have loved to have had the staging yards have reverse loops on them, but we just didn't have the room in this other room that we put the staging in to do that. So we had to go, we had no choice, we had to go with stub-in staging. But we have 6 tracks coming out on each end. The green one that you see closest to that wall, that's Cincinnati. That's where the trains are coming from, Cincinnati. The one next to it on the right, that's Chattanooga. So the way this layout lays out is when trains come out of this staging here, they're heading southbound there. And the first town they hit is right here, and this is Oneida there. And Oneida has a big yard in it. So I put in a big yard in Oneida. This is where a lot of the switching and a lot of things go on. The white or cream colored lines that you see, that's the main line. That's the line that runs around the whole layout. The black lines are switching spurs. The green line is the branch line, the New River branch line there. And that came in at a particular spot at a particular town where they had an interchange track. So we had to design this so that it worked like the real one did. Now, how did I get all this figured out? This track, it still exists except for the branch line, but I can figure out kind of where the branch line ran. So I used Google Earth to kind of research all this and find what I needed and where we needed to go. He wanted, as you heard earlier, he said he wanted buildings and industries that either do exist or did exist in some of these areas. So what I would do is I would go to each town and did they have grain elevators? What did they have in the towns? And then I would kind of try to put industries in. This is a place just north of Sunbright and Tennessee. And Sunbright is a really small town too. It's not very big. You ever been to Sunbright, Andy?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I've rail fed the entire line. I've been through Sunbright on the railhead in a steam locomotive in passenger equipment, and I've rail fed that entire line by, radios, chasing train, right. The trespassing when it wasn't as big a deal back years ago.
Well, this is by using Google Earth, this was an industry that I found right. I think it is just a little north of Sunbright. I have no idea what it is. It's totally abandoned. You can see that. It did have a spur that come into it, but I think the spur isn't even there. I think I blew that picture up and they've taken the turnout out of there. I have no idea what this building was there, but I needed an industry for Sunbright because I didn't have something in the Sunbright area on this layout. So I looked at this, seen what it was. Here's my Sunbright area. I got a little road coming down across the highway here. I got a house here. We got a little church sitting over here. Here's that industry. I have no idea what the industry was, but it happened to fit what I want to do. So I made it like a transfer place, and that where trucks can come in, they can do less than car loads or whatever. And the great thing about it was the building fit the area that I was working with and the scene that I had here and that. And it's a way, fellas, of using Google Earth to design. Now, if you think about this too, you have to be designing something that is prototypical. This gentleman didn't want me to design it, turnout for turnout. He simply wanted a representation of the area. That's what we were going after in that. So here's the finish. I'm going to blow this up a little bit, and tell me, Johnny, if that's okay, if it shows all right. Okay. Now, this is all with the scenery and everything, the town names and everything. So let's go over here to the right. We got this green staging yard. Again, remember, that's Cincinnati. So the trains are heading south, and they come out of a tunnel, and the first place they hit here is they hit Oneida, where this yard is at. And I've got a highway bridge, curved highway bridge right here where the trains come around here. That's Highway 456, which is actually a highway that runs through Oneida there. And it does curve over the main line right there. If you went on Google Earth and you look, you'd find it, you'd see that. That was a good thing. That was a great thing for me to add to this layout because it created a view block there right in that area. It helped define the Oneida area there. And down here, I added a engine servicing facility, but basically what we have here is a double track main line running through Oneida with this yard. And this is where on this layout, most of the switching operations are going to go. And that trains that are coming from Cincinnati or coming from Chattanooga, a lot of them will end up in this yard. And this is the classification yard that I talked about earlier. Now, again, remember, as we go around here, we're heading south all the time when we do this. So if we leave Oneida, the next town that we came to is Helenwood. Why did we put Helenwood on there? Because this green track that you see here, these green tracks, that's the interchange yard for the branch line, the New River branch line that ran up to a coal mine and ran up to a lumber mill up there. So we had to add this in. And if you go look on Google Earth, you can still see that interchange track there. It's still sitting there. And that I did add a couple of industries down in here for switching in that. But this is the branch line. I'm going to come back to the branch line in a minute. We're just going to kind of follow this main line around here. So the main line continues around. I've got a gravel company right here. This happens to be Glacier Gravel from Walters is what I put in there. But this is simply a gravel operation because it looked like when I was on Google Earth there was some kind of business that could have been that in that area. So yeah, I dropped it in and put it in there. Main line continues around. We're still heading south. Here's Glen Mary. I put Glen Mary in there because he wanted it in there, but again, all there is some buildings in Glen Mary. There's nothing. The trains don't stop there. Nothing goes on there. It's just a place there. What I did do here is I did put in a double track in here. This is for the most part, this is a single track main line through Tennessee. But this is the areas where I started putting in some of these long passing sidings. So this was a good area if trains were coming from both directions for them to meet and pass each other here. This was kind of wasn't quite in the middle of the layout, but it was about halfway through from each side there. Then the main line continued around the peninsula here. Then it runs through a tunnel, which Andy can verify. They had a lot of tunnels on this route, so I had to put some tunnels on here. And that runs underneath the lumber mill here, comes around, and then here's that Sunbright that I showed you earlier with that transfer there. After you go through Sunbright, then I came across the bridge here with a small little river here. Then we go through and we curve back along this area here. I wanted that hid because it's just kind of a 90-degree turn back. I didn't want it to be there. So I put a mountain there that it had to run through, but I put this little salvage yard sitting right in front of it. Now, this gentleman can put any industry he wants in any of these places. These were just suggestions that I was giving him as what I thought would fit and would work in these locations. There's the lift out. This is where you come into the layout. This is where you walk through to come into the layout. Remember, this room continues for another 10 feet or so to the left there. The town of Oakdale is an interesting town. It's a little bigger, but Andy can verify this. When you say bigger in Tennessee, that's kind of relative to some towns and that.
There's nothing really in Oakdale other. It's a division point of the railroad, and it was at one time they had a big resort there back in the early 1900s. But these days, there's a few dozen houses and some empty storefronts.
That's right. That's exactly right. But what Oakdale had, Andy, if you remember, that was kind of neat there. They had the river running around it there. There was a river that ran right there. Well, this worked out perfect for me because this was a good place to put some more industries in, which this probably has more industries than Oakdale's ever seen in its lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a good spot to add some more operations, some more working in that. And what I did, because the river ran basically in this area, I put the river along the outside edge of the bench work there. So with any of these roads, there's a bridge that goes over this. And I just thought this would be a very nice looking scene if you were standing there in the aisle and you were working these industries. You actually would have a river scene right in front of you there. And that I just thought it made sense there. These industries, no big deal. This is a propane company that I've got sitting here. I don't even remember for sure what this is here. Another small little industry here. This is a lumber yard that I've got sitting there. The key to this Oakdale area is this. We have the double main line running through here in this area for two reasons there. This is another place where trains can pass each other. And it's very important that this is here for trains coming from Chattanooga out of this staging yard, heading north there. You need a long passing siding. You need the longest passing sidings just before you go into staging. For this reason, if you got multiple operators operating this layout, I can guarantee you sometime during the operating session, somebody wants to get into Chattanooga staging. Somebody is leaving Chattanooga, heading northbound for Cincinnati. This is where the trains pass each other. This is where they get around each other. Trains can wait for trains to come from Chattanooga or vice versa. It doesn't make any difference. I also added the black line is a third line that could be used for passing, but it's also used to service this lumberyard industry here. That's all it really services. But I did connect it back into the main line so that if it needed to be used at some point for a train, say a little short local that was running, it could get into there and get out of the way of the mainline traffic that was running through the layout. So everything you see on this layout as far as track work, this just wasn't done because it looks kind of neat and it looks kind of pretty. Those tracks are there for specific reasons, specific operating reasons and that. Then there is a highway what have I got it there at 299 that runs across the over the line there just south of Oakdale. I threw that in as a view block. Again, it separates the scenes. Harriman is a town. There is no such thing as a Harriman junction, but I put the word junction in there because when the trains here, they have two choices. They head this way and they're heading to Chattanooga. They're going into staging. But if you guys, you may not have even seen this when I was talking about this. See this little line running up here and around, kind of a pink colored line or a fuchsia line? There's your continuous running, guys. This layout can be run with continuous trains. It's true point to point. But I added this into the layout because he wanted it to break in engines. And he said when visitors come to visit the layout, they do want to watch trains run. Well, here he can do that with it. But if you notice, I took the continuous running part of it, and it's extremely nondescript. I didn't want it to be part of the layout. I just wanted it to be an extra piece of track that allowed him to do continuous running there. The track that you see inside of this one is simply the yard lead, so that the yard can be switched by a yard switcher and that. But the pink colored one or purple, depending on how it shows up in your monitors, that's the continuous running part of this layout there. Now, let's go back to this branch line, because the branch line is, sure, go ahead.
Branch line. Is the branch line at a different elevation? Do you raise elevation a little bit going up?
Yes. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about here. That's what I want to. That's what I want to talk about now. We'll do that. It's a great question.
And while you're on Harriman Junction, I mentioned that you're actually prototypically accurate there. At the south side of Harriman, the track splits and heads a line to Knoxville off the left, just like your pink line or salmon-colored line does, and off the right heads toward Emory Gap and on to Chattanooga. So there is a place called Harriman Junction. It's not on a map that way, but the railroad calls it Harriman Junction.
So I'm really not that smart. I just got lucky, right?
Man, give me intelligence or luck. I'll take luck every time.
That's right. Yeah, it was again. He wanted continuous running, and so this was a great way to add it in. Okay, let's talk about this branch line elevations and everything. The branch line on this railroad. See, this main line running from Cincinnati to Chattanooga or Chattanooga Cincinnati, whatever way you want to talk about it. It really doesn't have a whole lot to do. I think Andy can probably verify this for me. It's mostly run through trains, isn't it, Andy, that run through there?
Absolutely. It's all traffic headed toward mostly headed toward New Orleans. It's the day, but they wanted to get Cincinnati was dying right after the Civil War. The Cincinnati decided, let's just throw all the money we have left at opening it up to the railroad since canals and riverboats weren't doing it, and they threw all the money at it, and Cincinnati boomed. It worked.
Yeah, that's so. In the real world, most of the traffic on this main line is run-through traffic. Literally, how it would operate is staging to staging. If we were talking about running the railroad here, stuff would leave Cincinnati, run to Chattanooga, or it would run from Chattanooga back up to Cincinnati, and that. So the branch line was very, very important to the overall operations of this layout. So we were prototypically correct in Helenwood of having this interchange track here or there. So then as soon as you leave Helenwood and you start around this loop up here, then the branch line starts gaining elevation. It's going up. What you don't see, because you can't do it in a 2D picture, is this main line stays on the same, say, river level route there, while this branch line is running uphill all the way around, clear around here until it gets over here to the lumber mill. And then as you see, I've got the main line running underneath this. And I think the elevation difference between the lumber mill here and starting back over here at the interchange, I think it's about 6 to 8 inches. It's not a huge amount. I mean, this is not a branch line that is real steep. Reason I didn't do that, and if we want to talk about being prototypically correct, I'm not so sure the New River branch line didn't run along a riverbed in Tennessee and was probably sitting from a elevation standpoint the same elevation as the main line was there. But we couldn't do that in this particular design, so I took some modeler's license or designer's license, and I said, well, the lumber mill is up in the mountains there, and the coal mine is up in the mountains. So what happens is, and this is, I think, prototypically correct too from what I read and some of the history I read, this is some passing sightings here, but this is the coal mine. This is where the coal mine operations are, and this is where the cars, empties and loads, are transferred and stored and everything. And you see this long little stub that goes there. That's there so that whoever's operating the mine can switch the mine out and never get in trouble with any trains that are going up to the mill or down from the mill there. And again, as this line goes up, it continues to go up. But in this area here where the coal mine is, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that all those tracks got to be flat. There, you can't have them sitting on a grade. Cars are going to roll away. So this, from about right here, this is all pretty much the same level. This is basically flat with this line going up. So what happens if you were standing right here, this line would be going up and this coal mine would be sitting a little bit down in a valley. It would only be sitting down maybe 2 or 3 inches. But that would be a neat scene. The coal mine would be kind of sitting just in a little bit of a valley. The blue line through here, I think I didn't mention it, but I think you guys assume that's the view block. That's so you can't see on the other side. But anyway, the branch line continues around, and then we get over here to the mill there, and we have all the tracks set up to do a lot of things. They're bringing in rough lumber. They're finishing it up. They're getting it ready to go. And then you see stacks and stacks of lumber here that are getting ready to be shipped out there. So the operation of this, you have two main operations. You have operations for the mill up there, and you have operations for the coal mine. So there's two. This is one of the few branch lines I've designed where we had kind of two major industries using the same branch. That's what I thought was kind of unique about it. This generates a lot of traffic, or could generate a lot of traffic, and all that traffic ends up right down here on this interchange track. And what you can have happen if you're going to operate prototypically is one of two things. The traffic that comes down from the branch line, or comes from branch line, it can stop here. It can be picked up by trains running through, or you can take a train out of Oneida, bring it over, pick it up, bring it back to Oneida, sort it in the classification yard into what trains they're supposed to go out in, and then they eventually get sent out, either going Cincinnati, going Chattanooga, whatever the case may be. But again, we've got two operations here. We've got lumber going on, and we have coal mining. But if you notice on the plan, I separated them. They're completely separated. With the view block I have going through there, you can't see the two of them. If you're operating the coal mine, you don't even realize there's a lumber mill over on the other side. Or if you're operating the lumber mill, you don't even realize there's a coal mine sitting on that side. So this is a layout that is what I call a true west layout. And there's sometimes people call true north, but this is a true west because this main line runs north and south through Tennessee. When I say true west, what I mean by that is anywhere that you're standing in this room, looking at the layout, looking at the track, looking at a piece of track, no matter where you're standing, everything to your right is north, everything to your left is south there. And doesn't make any, I don't care where you want to stand, it's true no matter where you are. So this is what I call, this is the point of why point-to-point layouts are so nice and so good, because as soon as you tell your operator, you can have a brand new operator who never operated on this layout come in, and all you have to say to him, this is a true west layout. Everything to your right is north, everything to your left is south. That's all an experienced operator needs to know. He knows where he's going then. He knows what his directions are. It's a little thing, but it's a really important thing when you're designing layouts. And then I talk about this all the time. I have a very good friend of mine designed a layout of narrow gauge up here he only lives about 5 minutes from me here for Colorado, one of the narrow gauge lines. And the problem was he didn't think about true north, true west, and he actually has the track plan a little backwards in how the trains run. I told him if I was designing it, I would have reversed the towns that he had on there, and it would have worked better. But he says, I didn't even think about that when I was building it. He said, I thought, well, this is a good place to put this yard, and that particular yard was in this particular town, so that's where he put it there. But again, we got continuous running here, guys, but it's really a secondary issue. It's not the main part of the railroad. And if you were holding op sessions on here, you would never use that continuous running track. That would never be, unless, and this is the only thing I would suggest to use it for, if I own this layout, I'd make it an additional staging yard. There is what I do. Yeah, that's long enough. You could put two trains on there. One could be heading south, one could be heading north, and it would work fine.
Right, it would be your Knoxville run out of Harriman Junction, so different traffic ran that way. And I got a couple questions for you if you're ready to take them.
Absolutely. I'm pretty much done.
And I back you up on the directionally pure thing, as John Armstrong talked about as well. Like both your and my hero in this area as well. My layout is true north or directionally pure, so it makes it a lot easier if you say you're going to run so far, then you're going to meet a westbound train. Well, you know that westbound train is coming from your right side headed west, so it becomes really second nature to you, and you're not always having to like recalculate where that's going to be. So a couple things about the entryway that's on the far left there. Is it, did you decide that, or do you know if he's building that as a lift out, a fold up, drop down? What's his plan there?
What we're going to do, I tend to make all of my lift outs approximately 30 inches wide. The reason I picked 30 inches on those is I tend to tell people to do their bench work in the range of 40 to 42 inches high. I think 40 inches to 42 inches is a really good height for bench work off the floor. Well, with a 30-inch lift out or drop down, you literally can do that. You can make it a drop down there because it's only 30 inches long, and if your layout is 40 some inches off the floor, the drop down's not going to hit the floor there. So I learned that the hard way when I built a layout one time. I built the layout at 40 inches, 38 inches off the thing, and I put a 40-inch lift out.
Yeah. Math just doesn't work. Yeah,
it doesn't work.
So I guess you wouldn't love my 58-inch bench work height that I have at the moment.
Well, I know. There's nothing wrong with that. It's we go through this. I just had, and most of you guys know him from YouTube, Walt, that's getting ready to design his layout. Walt was up to my house last week, and I had him come up because he put a YouTube video out. And he was talking about putting one of his main lines at 35 inches off the floor, 36 inches. And I told him, no, you can't, don't do that, Walt, even though it's going to be a multi-deck layout. So I suggested to Walt that he come up to my house here, and I showed him my layout, which actually has four different levels to it there. And I showed him what, 40 inches was, 42 inches, 38 inches. And he realized when he finally stood next to a layout where you were at those heights, that yes, a 35-inch off the floor layout for one of the scenic parts of the layout, it's going to be multi-deck, just was going to be too low. The one thing I showed him that I think kind of convinced Walt on it was I showed him having it at 42 inches and then going up about 20 inches to the next level, how you're able to see back into that lower deck. At 35 inches off the floor, even if you were 20 inches, if you were 55 inches up, you would still have trouble seeing back into the backdrops there because you'd have to lean over and that. So I just told him, I said, Walt, I would never, ever design a layout that was 35 inches off the floor. He says, well, what about sitting down in a chair? I said, that's a whole different story. But the problem you've got, his room is only about 10 foot wide. Yeah. And I said, you can't have people rolling around in chairs while other people are trying to get around them behind.
Miserable, try to follow trades. If you want to sit down for a yard job, like my lowest deck has a yard on it. So you'll sit down and do that job. But every other deck above it is, there's no sitting down. So right. And it's no big secret. It's no big design secret. Every multiple deck layout that I've ever designed, the upper decks are anywhere from 6 to 8 inches narrower than the deck below it. You back set the decks about, I like to back set them 6 inches. Sometimes I'll go 4, but not very often. Yep. And then that way you can take the lower deck, you can see back all the way to the backdrop. And the other thing that's key to this layout, and that's something I failed to mention, guys, is you'll notice that all of the bench work, when you take into account the view blocks running down both of the peninsulas, there's very few places where we have more than 30-inch wide bench work. Almost everywhere the bench work is 30 inches or less. Maybe up at the sawmill up there, I might have it a little wider up there, but that was because we had to get the sawmill in up there and I didn't have any choice. But that actually worked out well, because if you can visualize that scene with the main line running below and the sawmill and the yard up there 6-8 inches above it up on top, I think that'd be a really neat looking scene there. So how about aisle space? What do you like? Minimum looks like it's around 30, and then quite a bit.
This year, I think There's a couple pinch points. And the one is right south of Oneida here, right in here. That's a pinch point there on it. I think everything's a minimum of 24. And then I think we've gone to 30 in most places. He had more than enough room.
Oh, that 24 is a really short distance. I'm doing the same thing for just enough for it to curve back. And, you know, you don't need to pass there.
Well,
number of operators. That's an interesting question we had, too, and something I'm fascinated. Minimum number you would think would make a reasonable. I mean, of course, something you mentioned about whether you could break off the branch line to Helenwood or you could run a local out of Oneida. That's a really interesting point because that's how they ran that line. They ran it very diversely. One shift may do it one way, the next shift is different, depending on crew assignments. It wasn't real cut and dry because it's 330 miles or something long and it's wide open spaces. So they ran it different depending on how many crew they had. So how few operators do you think would make this interesting, and how many do you think you could fit in?
Well, I think you could easily. Here's what I would say you're going to have. You're going to have a yard master that's got to work Oneida. Has to work the Oneida area. That would take one operator to do that. Then let's assume we had maybe coming out of staging, half of those trains were run-throughs. All they do is run from Cincinnati to Chattanooga. They just run through the layout. They don't do anything but run through the layout and create havoc for anything else that's on the layout.
Yep.
Okay, let's use at least 3 tracks on both sides. That's six trains right there that are going to run. That could easily take up 2 operators whole 4 hours practically, or at least 3 hours at a time just running those 6 trains. Then you can have an operator that runs the locals, and if he's not busy, he can run a job up to the branch line. Again, the branch line, I see 2 operators, one that operates the coal mine and one that works the lumber mill there. So it'd be 2 separate. What are we up to now? We're easily up to probably 5 or 6 operators, I think, could operate this layout reasonably well. I think it would take a minimum to do it right, a minimum of 4. And I don't think you'd want to go 8 or 10 because then I think things are getting too crowded, too busy there. Another design trick, guys, that you want to think about, and this was done on this layout. I've done so many of them, it's just automatic. Think about standing in a location, switching cars, doing some kind of work on this railroad. I don't care where. You guys pick where you want to stand. If there's another operator working another part of the railroad, you 2 guys could be literally back to back, but you wouldn't even know it there. If somebody was working Helenwood and somebody was working the gravel pit there at Glen Mary, you're almost back to back. You don't even notice that each other's there. Somebody working Oakdale there and somebody working the mine, their backs are to each other. They hardly even know each other's there. They don't see each other. People are not side by side doing things here. They're always have their backs to each other and that. So somebody working Lansing or Sunbright and somebody was working the lumber mill, their backs are to each other basically. And also what you see is any place where we've got some switching operations, I don't try to cramp up the aisle space. I try to leave the aisle space wide enough there. This is why, and it's a funny thing, I have people that have asked me this when I design them, why do you design to take the Oneida Helenwood Peninsula there? Why'd you design it as a teardrop or like a light bulb? Very important in Oneida, because the yard lead is up there in that corner, that it'd be much wider up there because that's going to be a congregating point on this layout. People that are running trains out of Cincinnati or want to stand there because they want to watch their train come out of this tunnel up here. They'll hear their train, they want to see it. So they're going to be congregating here. You're going to have the yard master that's switching this yard. We've got an engine service facility here. You're going to have engines coming in. A lot of activity is going to happen in this area. So you want to try to make this as wide as you can there, because there's going to be quite a few bodies that are going to be in that area there. Now, this is a wall that separates the room here. And I'm surprised I haven't got the question yet. How would you know when your trains are staged, or how would you bring them out? It's very simple today with security cameras. They're not that expensive. You can put a security camera in that room. It can be sitting out on this wall where the continuous run track is. Engineers can watch their trains come out. You don't need to be in staging.
Or if you're not tech savvy, you can buy a baby monitor for $35. You know,
that's right.
So trivial these days. And this railroad was largely driven by, I mean, it was a signaled railroad very early in its life. It was CTC very early in its life. So to do it appropriately, you should probably have signals, which means some occupancy detection, in my opinion.
Right. And as far as signals go and all that, I leave all that up to my clients. I operate on both kinds of railroads. I operate on railroads that are 100% signal driven, and I operate on layouts where they're dispatcher driven.
Yeah, dark territory. Do you have a preference? Do you like them both? If they're done well, do you like them both? Well,
the 2,700 square foot layout that operates on signals, and you have to watch the signals there. There's another one that's about 1,200 square foot. It operates on signals. Then I operate on one that's around probably 600 square foot, maybe 500 square foot, no signals there. You just make sure there's a dispatcher that is watching the whole railroad, and he tells you when to move.
It's a Mother May I kind of system.
Mother May I.
How about TT&TO? Have you operated TT&TO?
I don't like that. That's probably the real, if you're talking about eras and you're doing, the post-war era and that, yeah, that's the way to go. But I'm just not that big on all that paperwork and that. The thing I always recommend to all of my clients, if you're going to, like this layout here, if he wanted to know what kind of operating system should I use, I would tell him every time car cards and waybills. There, I still think that's the best one of all, and that, and not using stuff like Ship It or the JMRA programs. Even though a lot of guys love it, there's just so much work to getting it set up, and I always use the example on Ship It or JMRI. Those programs don't know when a car gets misspotted in the wrong place. It doesn't know it. It thinks the car went to wherever it said the computer program generated the thing for it. In a car card and waybill system, if you have an operator in one op session that misspots the car at the wrong industry, you flip the waybills, the next operating system comes along, that car gets moved to where to the next place it's supposed to go, and nobody got hurt.
It's error correcting. What I describe as error correcting. Yep.
It's self.
I like this middle of the road system, the system that's growing, that's they call from here to there. I'm really fond of from here to there because it is car cards and waybills. It's all the benefit of what everybody's comfortable with, but the waybills don't get repetitive.
Yeah. So, well, the thing about the car cards and waybills, it's interesting on that. Almost all the layouts, well, not all. It's I would say the ones I operate on, it's probably a mix of different types of op sessions. But with the car cards and waybills, the fact that we only operate on this layout once every 2 months, you don't really even think about the repetitiveness of it, because you go back to this layout and you're probably going to run different jobs. I think he runs about 20, 25 trains during a 4.5-hour op session. I could go to that op session 5 times and maybe not run the same train twice there. So you don't even think about the repetitiveness of the car cards and waybills. It really becomes a non-issue.
Yeah, I've only seen that case where it was a problem a few times, and I think there's ways to correct for it. I know there's ways to correct for it. That's the from here to there system, which is car cards and waybills. It's just a slight modification on that. Sometimes we talk about those systems, though.
Well, the simple way, Andy, that I had it on 2 of my layouts, and that the simple way to do it is when a car gets done doing its job, if you don't want it to do the same job over again, throw another waybill in the pocket.
Yep.
There.
Here to there that's kind of what it does is, and it keeps your trains from being repetitive. It also takes advantage of smaller staging yards. We often, as modelers, have way too much equipment to fit on our layout, staging or otherwise. So you have to build trains between sessions, so there's a little more labor involved. But it's the trade that you put away a month ago when you last run would not be the trade that comes back out of staging. It will require that labor. But
I'm designing a layout right now for a gentleman who has less space than this layout takes up. He told me he has 1,200 cars.
wow. We're bad to collect way too much stuff. That's
exactly the problem with it. They, you know, you way over collect on things and that. But anyway, guys, this is the reason I like point-to-point railroads, is because this can be designed from an operating standpoint as a mini transportation system. Andy would know a lot better than I do of all the little idiosyncrasies that would have went on with this line that you can build into the operating system there, that you can add to it and that. But it's, when I started this design, I really didn't know where I was going to go. And as it ended up, I think it ended up with a fairly good design for him.
Oh, I think this is an incredibly interesting railroad. It is operationally, the track plan looks awesome, and scenically, I got a couple pictures I found while we've been talking too. If you want to see a couple pictures of this area, this area is just really interesting scenically. The high bridge that is on the second district that you're talking about was designed originally by the guy who built or the architect who designed or maybe civil engineer who designed the Brooklyn Bridge in New York, and it was later double tracked and it was stacked on the side. And this bridge is the highest railway bridge over a navigable stream in the United States. It's a really amazing bridge. That's close to Lexington. And then another thing I think is really interesting is this railroad was just infinitely modelable. Just it's everything we love about railroads. Fast trades, and a lot of them. You could stand by, talking in the chat with some of the guys a few minutes ago, you could stand, which also reinforces your point about a lot of through trades. You could stand trackside in the 90s when I was coming up in rail fanning. You could stand trackside in a couple hours and see a dozen trains go by. It was just massively busy. And they built these tunnels right after World War II. They cut these tunnels thinking they were going to put catenary up and put electric up. And they built these tunnels super high. I mean, over a set of double stacks, they're still 10 or 12 feet clear. And have these shafts. They're just really interesting tunnels. So everything about it just looks good railroading wise, and it's all the stuff we love about trades, tunnels, and a lot of bridges. There was originally 27 tunnels. There's only about 4 left, but they've daylighted most of those tunnels now. But everything, steep mountains, steep grades.
Interesting. Another thing that I always, it's interesting, and I tend to see a lot of people do on the YouTube channels, and that this railroad right here, as far as I'm concerned, if we were running trains, and again, we have 12 staging tracks there, we can run 12 trains. I would never run a train on this railroad that was longer than 20 cars long, maximum. Even though the staging tracks may hold 25 or 30 cars, depending on the era you're going to model, a 15 to 18 car train would be more than enough train to run on this layout and would look fine. I get comments from people all the time, I want to run a 40 car train. No, you don't. You shouldn't be running 40 car trains. The layout that I operate on that is 2,700 square foot. It's just in a 3,000 square foot basement. The layout takes up 2,700 square foot. The maximum car length on that railroad is 25 cars.
That's my favorite. My sweet spot is 25. Yeah, I think a 25 car trade looks great.
And again, we're talking about a 2,700 square foot layout, taking 20 operators to run it, and the maximum is 25 cars.
That's 25 looks like a long trade to me. It's believable. Sure. It sells the illusion. To me, a 10-car coal train doesn't look like it should have a 2-foot long steam locomotive on the head end and a 2-foot pusher. Right. But 25 looks believable to me.
Well, again, we can go back to if you looked at from Sunbright to Glen Mary there, if you had a 40-car train, the engine would be arriving in Glen Mary, and the caboose hasn't even left Sunbright yet.
That's a big problem.
Yeah, you don't want that. That's why, a 15-car train, 18-car train would be enough, and it would look good. It would look nice operating in that.
Speaking of which, what era was this guy going to build this layout for?
You know, I knew somebody was going to ask that, and I honestly don't remember, Andy. I was going to look here in his file and see.
I think they're all interesting. Prior to World War II, there's some cosmetic differences and a few operational differences, but post World War II, it operated the same up to today.
Yeah, I think there. I was just looking at what he sent me. When the original email I got from him, he says, I would like a quote to do an HO scale point-to-point layout with a branch line loosely based on the CNO and TP at Oneida, Tennessee, and then the New River branch at Helenwood. There. And the best thing about this email is he says, I would like you to design a point-to-point layout for me.
Absolutely. You knew he was serious and he understood the kind of stuff that you would like to design for.
That's right. And he says, I want to model the yard at Oneida. We did that. And he says, the storage tracks at Helenwood were the Brimstone Railroad. Do you remember that, Andy?
It went away a long time ago, though.
Yeah, he said the Brimstone Railroad interchanged coal and lumber with the Southern Railroad, which is what we're doing right here on this.
And there was a bunch of little branch lines that were operated by secondary carriers. When they near the transition era, a lot of the branch lines got sold off to small companies. So the famous Southern 4501 that runs excursion service was ran as a logging locomotive for many years into the diesel era on a branch line off the CNO and TP. Possibly this one. I don't remember which one.
I'm finishing reading this now. And again, this is my, my best client I could ever have. He says he wants to lay out big enough for 6 operators. So he's got a plan for this thing. And 6 operators is probably perfect for this one here. And he says, I want the layout. The layout will be fictional railroad set in the mid-60s.
Mid-60s. That's perfect.
Absolutely.
Southern high hood, tuxedo, the very earliest would, so they would be, I think that's tuxedo paint scheme, but definitely the high hood diesels, and I'm pretty sure tuxedo paint scheme would be brand new, so fresh, shiny locomotives in that awesome paint scheme.
And the key to this thing to make it really work good, Andy, is again, I've designed it. Trains run through scenes once. One time.
About that, my plate is that way. I preach that to people all the time. Directionally pure, sincere. Is that John Armstrong called it sincere, right?
I think so. Yeah. See, my hero was Alan McClendon in the VNO. I mean, that was the guy who I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing here tonight if it wasn't for Alan. I mean, he's the one that got me kind of off my butt, so to speak.
See, I had the joy of when I grew up in the hobby or come up in the hobby, Alan McClellan and Tony Custer and Ohio Southern. I'm trying to think his name. Henderson, whatever.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, there was those couple 3 guys that were operating.
They all interchange cars on their layouts. Their layouts interchange cars.
I grew up in their heyday when they were building the Allegheny Midland and the V&O, and what an awesome time to become a modeler. So I just was inundated with operation by design or from design my whole life.
Well, and again, I this is a little crusade I go on, but that's okay. I'm trying to get the YouTube community to understand there's a whole other area in this model railroading besides just building the one in your basement so you can watch trains run. There's this whole other thing that you can do with this hobby. And
the point is, what are you going to do after you build it? And standing and watching it, unless it's a display. If you're, Arthur, remember that old movie Arthur? He just had the train running behind him in the background. Or unless you're the, the Addams Family or something, and you're going to crash them, you're going to need something to do. Yeah. And operating gives you something to do.
I just designed a layout for a gentleman. I designed it with 30 buildings on it. It turned out really looking nice, not a real big layout. Every building on the layout except 4 are Craftsman quality kits. Every building is anywhere from $75 to $400.
It's easy.
And it's really basically a display layout. It will operate and it will function, but the key to this layout is going to be these buildings he's going to have on there. We got a big wharf scene. We've done a lot of really neat things to it, and it's what he wanted. It's what he wanted to have.
The prof says, who said a show layout did not have something operational to do? I would agree completely, Prof. The profs from Australia, where they do excursion or exhibitions a lot, and the people doing those kind of show layouts, exhibition layouts in Europe and in down under, operational and show layout are not mutually exclusive. So, like in America, exhibition is just not something people. We just don't have that experience. I would wish we did. So layouts are either one of two kinds. You either operate them or they're loops. And most of the modular clubs, I mean, operating modular clubs are few and far between.
That's right.
But they're few and far between.
That's right.
Yeah, and he's asking about standard aisle width. And he covered them a little bit ago, but said there's a couple pinch points, but most aisles look like they're around 4 foot, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, the squares you see in the picture are 12-inch squares. So even if you want to talk about this area right here, that's really 24 inches right there. If you look at the squares and that, and it only happens for about a foot, and it instantly widens back out after you walk through that pinch point there.
Yeah, and you might be down to 30 or somewhere closer to 30, maybe 24 around the lift out. But everywhere else has all kinds of space in front of Oneida.
I know for a fact this area right here and here, that's exactly 30 inches.
Yeah.
Because when I design these type of track plans, and I have this where people walk in, see what this layout does too, and this is kind of something I try to design into my track plans. When you walk into the layout, you as the visitor have a choice to make. You can either go left or you can go right. If you go left, you're going to see a very small portion of the layout. If you look right, you're going to see this town of Oakdale along here, and you're going to see the coal area, but then you've got to come around the corner to start seeing all the other things that are going on here. So when I try to design layouts so nobody can stand in one spot and see the whole thing. There, they have to walk around to see things, but yeah, I know this area, this horseshoe here is 30 inches right there.
I love
and for an operating, that's more than enough room.
I love the layouts that kind of give you a little something to explore. If you walk in and see the whole thing, you know, it just humans can judge size really well if you could see it all. But if you have to explore to find your way around, and I've heard Big Bill explain a few times about his track plan, about his layout rather, where people would walk in and say, "Oh wow, this is awesome," and then they go down to the end of the aisle and turn back and see a whole bunch more railroad. I think that just it gives you a sense of scale that's hard to wrap your head around instantly.
Well, what's hard too, Andy, you've done it. I've done it. You know, that's why I do this stuff. Until you actually go and operate on a layout that's designed like these are designed on, you don't understand how you get so immersed in, I'm not running a model train here. I'm running a train. I'm running a transportation system. And you get so focused on what you're doing there that you forget about everything that's going on around you.
It's got a job to do. It's an infinitely safer job in better environment, not standing out in the rain and snow, but there's a job, there's problems to solve, tasks to figure out, other people to work with and collaborate with to get the job done. It's fascinating.
It's hard to explain to people operating layouts as opposed to display layouts. You know, you have to experience it to really understand how neat it can be. You know, and I think one of the problems we have in this hobby, and I see it a little bit in the YouTube community here, people are afraid to go do that because they think they don't understand it. And I don't want to make a fool out of myself. That's the last thing that'll happen to you. That's the last thing that most of the operating layouts in the country, they'll be more than happy to talk to you, to help you out and all that.
Well, they're going to warm you up to it anyway. So on the prototype, when you go out on the prototype, you're going to certify on a section of track. You go out and you ride up and down the track with somebody else as their second or whatever for a few days or weeks to learn some particulars of that line. Us modelers take that same thing into account. I don't care how skilled you are. You may have some of it. You may be able to make some really good educated guesses about it, but I don't care how skilled you are. If you go to a fresh layout that you've never seen before, you're not going to instantly know where every town is and what siding lengths are. And so they're normally going to pair you up with somebody or give you a job that's not hard, that's a through trade, and let you get some experience as to how the layout lays out.
Well, that's what the big layouts that I operate on. If you come in and you're new, you've never operated on it, what you just said is exactly true. They'll give you a through freight, and all you do is run from staging to staging with it. Watch your signals, listen to what the dispatcher's telling you to do and everything. But what that does is you run a couple of those. Now at least you know where the layout goes. You know how the track tends to go. Then you can give somebody a job where they've got to go out on the line, do some switching, do some other things. But you know, I used to do that on the one I had, my operating layout. Anybody new came, I made them run 2 through freights before they ever got to do any other jobs. They needed to see where the layout ran. How did it work?
Yeah, you've got to spend a little time getting comfortable. Would that be true of any layout whatsoever? Yeah. Most people I like 2-man crews. You know, if it's lax, if you've got a lot of people, I love throwing a couple of guys together. I like working with somebody else and writing a trade. Let somebody deal with the paperwork. So let somebody do the conductor job. Somebody run the throttle.
This layout here that we've been talking about here for the last hour and 15 minutes here. This is not a layout you want to build and just enjoy yourself. It wouldn't be any fun. This wouldn't be fun. You want to be able to have friends come over and enjoy it with you. So, well, Johnny, if there's more questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I think I've said about everything I can say about this thing.
Yeah, I think we got all the questions answered. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I think we've covered most of them. If you repeat a lot of the common stuff, it's really an interesting railroad, though. And of course, yeah. I love seeing it on TP. I've already modeled it before as well, but I think you've done an excellent job of taking something that was 100-ish miles and shrinking it to something that's still believable. So
well, I think what we've actually taken into account here is, like you say, it's a 300-mile railroad, but we shrunk it down to maybe 100 miles here. We've tried to design, and that's the other thing you need to do. That goes back to that selective compression we talked about a couple months ago. And that.
Yeah, I'm going to write something about selective compression in an upcoming e-bag as well, just in my food for thought.
Right.
I think, selective compression is something we have to do. There's no modeler that doesn't do it. No. I think sometimes we overdo it. You either see people come from one side or the other of that argument. And I think that this conversation makes a little sense here because you've done a really good job, I think, of selectively compressing a section of railhead that I know pretty well into something that's still believable, interesting, fun, with a lot of operational value. But I think people do one or two things. They either decide they don't want to selectively compress anything whatsoever at all, and that's completely unreasonable, or they massively over compress everything and try to fit, the entire western district of the UP into a single car garage or something. So,
well, with this particular client here, the best thing that he said to me is he said he would like a representation. He didn't say he wanted it exact. He just wanted it to represent what he remembers, But if he's doing the 60s, that's probably when he grew up with the trains. And he's probably thinking about his childhood, watching trains run, when he was, again, he said he's born in Glen Mary, lives in Oneida now.
I don't think there's a bad time you could have modeled this line, but
probably not.
This is a good line, especially for a single deck layout. That's a lot of railroad in a room. I'd love to see it if he ever shares a picture with you of it, because
I'd like some of them I design. I always wonder if they ever get built. I'd like to see this one get built.
I would.
Be a neat layout.
I would too.
hit my screen share?
Kill it.
Kill it. I'm back.
Let the people see the voice behind the screen.
I'm here.
And pull the curtain back from the wizard a little bit.
Pull the curtain back. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I just, for some people, I know this is boring, but I just think it's a part of the hobby that needs to be explored more. Here's the
testimony to it. Virtually everybody who builds it, I've never seen anybody who had an operational railroad ever go back and build a loop years later. Once they're in. But virtually everybody who builds a loop, it's
yeah, and that's the end of Andy.
No, he's back. He came back.
Well, like Gino here recently, in his YouTube video, and he's got some stuff coming up in the eBag as well. JD was saying in the chat too. Gino built a layout that was largely focused on what he was building for a long time, and now he's redesigning his layout to make it operational. That's the evolution of a modeler, fairly typical evolution of a modeler. So,
well, I don't want people to think that the newbie should get into the hobby and this is what he should build. There's no way a newbie could build this. He doesn't understand it. Go build your 4x8. Go build your shelf layout. But never be afraid to tear it down and to start over again. Because you're always going to build a layout better than your other one.
But like Joe, if you never talks about building a chainsaw layout, build your first layout knowing it's a learning experience, knowing you're going to chainsaw it.
That's exactly right. That's right. Yeah, I've personally, I'm 71 years old. I've built 5 layouts, and I still haven't got it right. Still don't have it right.
No, I mean, this is my 13th layout, and I worked on the design for this for a decade, and I still missed things. I mean, if I could go back a few years, I would still make some changes, but I'm not afraid to tear into it with a saw and change it to this day. So,
I think the key that people need to, as I said in the first or second slide about what newbies do, they don't go into it with a plan. They just do it. They just start doing it, and they start throwing things together. And and that's perfectly fine. But at the cost of stuff today, they're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars. That if they had, if they had somebody design them a track plan, of course pat myself on the back, and I shouldn't do that here, but I always kind of get upset with people. I had a situation happen where one of the YouTubers got a hold of me, wanted me to design a layout, and we talked about it and everything, and kind of got a good idea what he wanted. He says, "What are you going to charge me?" I quoted him a price. It wasn't that high. "Oh, I can't afford that." 2 YouTube videos later, he bragged on the video about he had 4 sound locomotives on order. There. Well, it wasn't that he couldn't afford me. It's just that the sound locomotives he could touch and feel, and he liked that better than. And I just kind of think to myself, okay, wouldn't it be nice to have a good operating layout to run those sound locomotives on?
Wait, if you got around without a lot of knowledge about exactly what to do, if you built a whole bunch, if you know a lot about the prototype, that's different. But if you don't know much about it, but you still want something interesting as a good second layout. I mean, first layout out, I understand. Throw a circular track on a plywood, tear into it, make changes, figure it out. It's a toy. It's a learning experience. But for your first big layout, where you're going to put thousands and thousands of dollars into it, spending some measure of hundreds on a good plan will save you thousands. So,
sure,
I would agree with that.
Yep. Well, Johnny, how much further you want me to go with this?
Well, I was fixing to say, I think the clock is about to toll.
Well, we're close to 30 minutes. Yeah. I mean, an hour and 30 here. So.
Yeah. I think we've had a really good show.
Well, I hope some people learn some stuff here, and it's
like it.
It's kind of fun going through this.
Yeah, look like it over in the chat. People would find it very interesting. Plus, Split Rock was over there. He was talking too, so he helped things along.
Tom's got a wealth of knowledge. He's a prototype railroader, so He's a railroader in both senses, so you expect him to have
and see, it's guys like that I don't need to help. It's the people that have been in the hobby maybe for 3 to 5 years and all of a sudden realize, the continuous running was okay, but I need to take it to the next step there. That's the people that I can really help. There.
Oh, you're absolutely the man I would send anybody building their second, third, fourth layout to or something. You know, if you've built a whole bunch of them, you ought to be able to do it probably, but.
Yeah. Well, not everybody understands, you know, the little idiosyncrasies that, you know, I've been doing it for so long. It's automatic. You don't even think about it. You just know you have to include it.
But a lot of modelers don't love the prototype necessarily as much, or love the history so much. You know, they may love transition models in the way they look, but they don't want to do all the history and research to understand the fundamentals of what makes a railroad function. And you know, guys like you and I, to some degree, love the history and love the transportation system makeup.
Yeah. Well, this layout that I designed that we talked about tonight, the great thing about that, if it gets built for this gentleman, is it's not just a layout. He gets to talk about it. He gets to show people, here's what it did. It does, you know, this is what happened.
Well, he gets to enjoy it with other people. It's a participatory act. Right. People get to do something collective together, spend a few hours, not standing there for 20 minutes watching a couple trains go by, but spend a few hours solving puzzles together. I mean, I often call it a role-playing game because it's not that far removed from kind of being a role-playing game.
That's what you're doing. You're role-playing. That's all you're doing.
I'm never into Dungeons and Dragons or anything. I'm a geek. I am unabashed geek, but Dungeons and Dragons was never my thing. But the role-playing of operating the railroad, I find infinitely enjoyable.
Absolutely. It's what's kept me in it for as long. Johnny, if you want to stop this, please tell us. We'll stop it. Andy and I have talked, you know, we can keep talking forever.
Yeah, I think we've come to the witching hour here. So
okay.
Got a number of questions answered out. You've given us a lot of good information too again tonight. We appreciate that. Appreciate the information Andy put in too.
Hey, I tell you what, Andy, couldn't have done it without you. Really couldn't have. I think you helped it all.
Well, thank you.
You helped it.
You do a lot of really good shows, brother. So I'll take the compliment, but I've watched a lot of good shows for you. So.
All righty. Well,
I appreciate you being here.
We'll hit the transition button here, and want to tell everybody to go to YouTubeModelBuilders.com. There you can check the schedules for all the shows that we put on now. Tuesday and Wednesday shows are at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. The Thursday and the Saturday show are at 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. The Saturday live show is once a month. Thursday shows are every Thursday of each week. The ones I like to refer to as slightly controlled chaos. Especially when I get a few of the characters in there at the same time. But also while you're there, be sure to click on the e-magazine and sign up for a notification when it comes out. JD said that he did put it out probably about an hour ago, so everybody that signed up should be getting notifications for that right now. And this is another good issue that he and his team have produced. It is a little late, but that's okay because they all deserve a vacation. Everybody deserves a vacation from time to time. Hey, Big Bill, where's my vacation at, by the way? But anyway, JD was not happy about it coming out a little late because of the vacation, but a lot of us kept telling him, don't worry about it. He's on time all the time, so being a little late occasionally for good reason, yeah, that's not a problem, especially with the publication that he and his team put out. So with that said, appreciate everybody coming in tonight, and thank you, Bill, again for another good show. Appreciate Andy being on with you, and we shall see you this coming Thursday at 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern Time for the Thursday night general talk show. Everyone have a good night. We'll see you Thursday.